stand by for action.
Thanks for joining me. My name is Dave Miller, and for 3 years I have been the Unpleasant Blind Guy. I'd like to use this 3rd anniversary special to talk about a dirty little secret in our society and a problem that is growing. I'm speaking of slavery in the United States of America today. Now, for me, inspiration for this topic began when I was listening to an episode of the Exceptional Conservative show, and Kenneth McClinton was covering this in regard to missing children and the Relisha Rudd law. I was further inspired during a discussion with Ian Crossland of the English Defense League. Those of us in the new pro-civil rights movement understand that slavery is not just something that happened in the 19th century and further back. It is an evil that exists today, is being practiced many places in the world, and is being promoted particularly by the followers of one ideology. From the U.S. Department of State. Over the past 15 years, trafficking in persons and human trafficking have been used as umbrella terms for activities involved when someone obtains or holds a person in compelled service. The United States government considers trafficking in persons to include all of the criminal conduct involved in forced labor and sex trafficking, essentially the conduct involved in reducing or holding someone in compelled service. Under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, as amended and consistent with the United Nations Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, the Palermo Protocol, individuals may be trafficking victims regardless of whether they once consented, participated in a crime as a direct result of being trafficked, were transported into the exploitative situation, or were simply born into a state of servitude. Despite a term that seems to connote movement, at the heart of the phenomenon of trafficking in persons are the many forms of enslavement, not the activities involved in international transportation. According to the United States Department of State, these are the different kinds of slavery. Forced labor, also known as involuntary servitude. Bonded labor. Debt bondage. Debt bondage among migrant laborers. Involuntary domestic servitude. Forced child labor. Most international organizations and national laws recognize that children may legally engage in certain forms of work. There is a growing consensus, however, that the worst forms of child labor should be eradicated. The sale and trafficking of children and their entrapment in bonded and forced labor are among those worst forms of child labor. A child can be a victim of human trafficking regardless of the location of that exploitation. Indicators of forced labor of a child include situations in which the child appears to be in the custody of a non-family member who has the child perform work that financially benefits someone outside the child's family and does not offer the child the option of leaving. Anti-trafficking responses should supplement, not replace, traditional actions against child labor, such as remediation and education. However, when children are enslaved, their abusers should not escape criminal punishment by virtue of limited responses to child labor practices rather than more effective law enforcement action. Child soldiers. Child soldiering can be a manifestation of human trafficking when it involves the unlawful recruitment and use of children through force, fraud, or coercion as combatants or for labor or sexual exploitation by armed forces. Perpetrators may be government forces, paramilitary organizations, or rebel groups. Many children are forcibly abducted to be used as combatants. Others are made unlawfully to work as porters, cooks, guards, servants, messengers, or spies. Young girls can be forced to marry or have sex with male combatants. Both male and female child soldiers are often sexually abused and at high risk of contracting sexually transmitted diseases. Sex trafficking. When an adult is coerced, forced, or deceived into prostitution, or maintained in prostitution through coercion, that person is a victim of trafficking. All of those involved in recruiting, transporting, harboring, receiving, or obtaining the person for that purpose have committed a trafficking crime. Sex trafficking can often occur within debt bondage, as women and girls are forced to continue in prostitution through the use of unlawful debt purportedly incurred through their transportation, recruitment, or even their crude sale, which exploiters insist they must pay off before they can be free. It is critical to understand that a person's initial consent to participate in prostitution is not legally determinative. If an individual is thereafter held in service through psychological manipulation or physical force, that person is a trafficking victim and should receive the benefits outlined in the United Nations Palermo Protocol and applicable laws. Child sex trafficking. According to UNICEF, as many as 2 million children are subjected to prostitution in the global commercial sex trade. International covenants and protocols obligate criminalization of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. The use of children in the commercial sex trade is prohibited under both U.S. law and the Palermo Protocol, as well as by legislation in countries around the world. There can be no exceptions and no cultural or socio-economic rationalizations preventing the rescue of children from sexual servitude. Sex trafficking has devastating consequences for minors, including long-lasting physical and psychological trauma, disease, including HIV and AIDS, drug addiction, unintended pregnancy, malnutrition, social ostracism, and death. The problem of slavery in the United States of America today is real. When many people hear the word slavery, they think of the miniseries based on Alex Haley's Roots. Modern-day slavery, as you've just heard, is quite different. It can be illegal aliens being forced into labor as part of the price for bringing them into the United States. It can be domestic servants that your next-door neighbor might have, and you might not even know it. People forced to live with them and do whatever they want for various reasons. It's illegal and it's evil. Now, according to Change.org, the U.S. Department of Justice reports that between 2008 and 2010, 83% of sex trafficking victims found within the United States were United States citizens, and 40% of those were children. Furthermore, the majority, upwards of 85% in some states, of trafficked children have had contact with the foster care system. And this is a problem, people, not just in the United States, but in other countries as well. From Change.org, our nation's foster care systems do not have the appropriate resources to address this epidemic. Far too often when a child is placed in foster care, they wind up enslaved in the sex trade. Measures are moving through the United States Congress right now that might alleviate some of this. The Strengthening Child Welfare Response to Trafficking Act, or H.R. 469, will provide child welfare agencies with training and guidelines for working with youth who have been or are currently victims of trafficking. Now, I encourage my fellow Americans to find out more about this legislation and to become proponents of it. However, it can't just stop there. Even if the measure is passed, the question of selective enforcement will almost certainly come about. Now, what do I mean? I reference over 1,700 girls and boys in the city of Rotherham in the United Kingdom who were sexually exploited for over a generation, while child welfare officials there knew about it and did nothing to stop it. Many of these children were in foster care homes. The reason that nothing was done to stop this horrific practice in this one corner of the United Kingdom, this tip of the child sexual exploitation iceberg, is because those child welfare officials did not want to be labeled as racist. Why? Because the complaints were coming from children who had been sexually abused by Muslims. Now, am I saying that only Muslims are involved in child sex trafficking and child sex slavery? No, I am not. I am, however, saying that what passes for Islamic culture condones these practices, encourages them, and encourages participation in them by people who know that they are going on, but who will not report these activities. Child sex slavery and trafficking in children was a problem in the United States of America long before large numbers of Muslims began infiltrating themselves into our nation. At that point, our Judeo-Christian society considered this behavior, as we consider all slavery, to be evil. You see, this is what it comes down to. There'll be people listening to this who will say, well, there you go, Dave, picking on the Muslims again. Slavery was mentioned in the Bible, and slaveholders in the United States did use the Bible as an excuse to hold slaves. There's a difference, though. Our Judeo-Christian society grew up. We realized, as a people, the evil of slavery. It was officially defeated at the cost of hundreds of thousands of American lives. And there have been people quietly working in the background to try and stop other forms of slavery that have been going on since then. Because in the American culture, slavery is evil on both Judeo-Christian religious and secular levels. The followers of Muhammad feel differently, however. This is from thereligionofpeace.com in answer to the question, does Islam condone slavery? Does Islamic teaching allow Muslim men to keep women as sex slaves? Islam neither ignores nor condemns slavery. In fact, a large part of the Sharia is dedicated to the practice. Muslims are encouraged to live in the way of Muhammad, who was a slave owner and trader. He captured slaves in battle, he had sex with his slaves, and he instructed his men to do the same. The Quran actually devotes more verses to making sure that Muslim men know they can keep women as sex slaves, that's 4 of them, than it does to telling them to pray 5 times a day. That's 0. I'm going to read some, not all, examples from the Quran, the Hadiths, the Sirah, of Islamic teachings covering and encouraging slavery. From the Quran, chapter 4, verse 24. And all married women are forbidden unto you, except those captives whom your right hand possesses. Even sex with married slaves is permissible. Chapter 24, verse 32. And marry those among you who are single, and those who are fit among your male slaves and your female slaves, breeding slaves based on fitness. From Hadith and Sirah. Bukhari 80:753. The Prophet said, the freed slave belongs to the people who have freed him. Bukhari 41:593. Slaves are property. They cannot be freed if an owner has outstanding debt, but they can be used to pay off the debt. Bukhari 62:137. An account of women taken as slaves in battle by Muhammad's men after their husbands and fathers are killed. The women were raped with Muhammad's approval. Bukhari 34:351. Muhammad sells a slave for money. He was thus a slave trader. Muslim 3901. Muhammad trades away 2 black slaves for 1 Muslim slave. Did you catch that one, Black Lives Matter? Muslim 4112. A man freed 6 slaves on the event of his death, but Muhammad reversed the emancipation and kept 4 in slavery to himself. He cast lots to determine which 2 to free. Bukhari 47:743. Muhammad's own pulpit, from which he preached Islam, was built with slave labor on his command. People, when we enforce our laws in the United States of America today, we cannot be selective. We must enforce those laws equally to everyone. At this moment, progressives in both the Democratic and Republican parties are preparing people's minds to accept Mohammedans as mere victims of the rash acts of a few. I've just shown you through documentation that the Islamic ideology approves of and encourages slavery. We will not stop child sex slavery or other forms of slavery by the removal of Islam from our nation. We will, however, slow it down and make sure that it remains socially as well as legally unacceptable. To this end, in this election of 2016, I encourage you all to vote for candidates from local to national government who have knowledge of law and are willing to use it to protect the citizens of the United States of America from a day when once again slavery might become an open, widespread, and socially accepted practice in our nation. Now, all source documentation for this program will be found at UBG Contact on Twitter. That's where you can contact me with comments, questions, show suggestions, awesome American suggestions. I love stories about people doing charitable, patriotic, and exceptional things. It is the main contact point for the show. Now I'd like to move on to the Awesome American segment. The Awesome American for this time is 15-year-old Zoe Butchin of Ridgefield, Connecticut. And this is a story on the Hoopla La website by Amy Chuddy, posted April the 6th of 2016. Parkinson's disease affects nearly 10 million people worldwide. April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, and April 11th is World Parkinson's Disease Day. 15-year-old Zoe Butchin from Ridgefield, Connecticut, knows this all too well. The charitable teen's father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease last year. With a history of charitable deeds, Zoe knew she had to do something to help her dad and the cause. Zoe created the Dance, Shake, and Donate campaign. The campaign encourages people to post videos of themselves dancing and make a contribution to the Michael J. Fox Foundation. She didn't stop after that viral campaign. She continues to create events that bring in money to fund the fight against Parkinson's. Whether it's dancing or donating, this amazing kid will stop at nothing to help her father in his fight against the disease.
Hi everyone! I thought it was time to share an update on how Dance Shake Donate is doing after just 4 exciting weeks. To all that have participated, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing the link, supporting the message, creating and posting videos, and most of all, donating toward the cause. Thank you to everyone at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all of your support and guidance. To date, we have raised over $22,000 and working hard so we can reach our goal of $100,000 or hopefully even more. Now for some big news. On November 22nd, my hometown of Ridgefield, Connecticut will be closing down Main Street to host the largest Dance Shake Donate gathering to date. Thank you to our mayor, Rudy Marconi, for your support in making this happen. So if you are available on the morning of November 22nd from 8:30 to 10:30, I challenge you to come out and join us on Main Street. News crews and professional videographers will be on site to capture this amazing effort. I'm hoping that Taylor Swift will see our campaign and support the cause. Even if it is just retweeting or posting on Facebook, it would mean a lot. I will continue to provide updates, and remember to donate by visiting danceshakedonate.com. Remember, with just a little bit of dancing, we can make a big difference.
The event was held, and everyone had a blast. Take a listen to the end of it. Giving is an exercise of power that is granted to us by God. It can be a solemn, onerous, and even painful occasion, or it can be an occasion for fun. Awesome Americans like Zoe Butchin know this very well. Finally, I want to say that one of the things that I was taught by the 9/11 attack is that life is transitory. That extends, of course, to circumstances. 3 years ago, I started The Unpleasant Blind Guy on YouTube, and I had as few as 17 listeners in 1 week. Now it's my honor for this program to be on Spreaker.com through the SHR Media page and featured on High Plains Pundit Radio. It's my further honor to work with Jeff Mitchell and Jan Rennie on English Defense League Radio, and to co-host with Dan Butcher of High Plains Pundit Radio, a program podcast to over 40 affiliates with at least 25,000 listeners each week. God has gifted me with much over the past 3 years, but one thing that I know is that it could all disappear tomorrow. I take nothing and no one for granted, and I know that one of God's greatest gifts to me has been the people that take time to listen to my program. And that is why I say at the end of each long-form program, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening for these first 3 years, and may your God go with you. Goodbye. The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2016 Anno Domini.